Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our virtual Digital Innovation Summit. I'm Alexandra Posadzki, telecom reporter for the Globe and Mail, and I'm thrilled to be your MC and moderator for today's discussion. Before we get going, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know in the question box on your screen, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Our team has been working to ensure that everyone has the best technical experience possible, but in the event that we run into any difficulties, please bear with us, and we will get you back up and running as soon as we can. Thank you to all of those who have sent in questions ahead of time. You can also ask a question during today's event by using the chat box on your screen. So we will take a few of your questions closer to the end of the discussion. And lastly, everyone who registered for the webcast will receive a link to the recorded version so you can watch the event again whenever you'd like. And now, without further ado, let's get our panel underway. The Globe and Mail has gathered a group of experts to discuss how digital innovation and transformation has been accelerated in recent months and what organizations need to do in order to best prepare for the future. As we all know, digital transformation is a hot topic that has been on nearly every organization's to-do list for many years, but the pandemic has really illustrated the importance of investing in a digital strategy. While some industries have easily embraced remote work and the need for enhanced technological capabilities, others have been caught off guard. We hope that you will take away some actionable items and advice from our panel of business leaders who will discuss how companies should anticipate and prepare for the next rapid shift post pandemic and beyond. I'd first like to introduce everyone to Stephanie Terrell, partner at KPMG in Canada. Stephanie is the national leader of management consulting for KPMG here in Canada and brings over 25 years of experience to her role, advising corporate clients and the public sector on strategic decisions, digitization, and large scale transformation enabled by technology. Welcome, Stephanie. Next, we'd like to welcome Jane Federitz, who is Chief Talent and Transformation Officer for TransAlta, an energy company based in Alberta. Jane is a lawyer with over 18 years of legal experience in both the energy industry and as a private practitioner. At TransAlta, Jane oversees all human resource matters, including talent and culture and leadership development. Hi, Jane. Next, please join me in welcoming Tyler Lessard, Vice President of Marketing for Vidyard. Vidyard is one of the fastest growing software companies in Canada and is a leading provider of video hosting, management, and creation tools for businesses. Tyler has been with the company for 6 years and has seen it grow from a Series A startup into a company of more than 200 employees. He previously worked for BlackBerry and mobile security software provider Fixmo. Welcome, Tyler. And last but certainly not least, we'd like to welcome Shazan Chu, who is the Chief Operating Officer for RBC Ventures. Shazan oversees the strategic roadmap for the bank's portfolio of ventures and leads a team of growth marketers who help launch these ventures into market and oversee their growth. Prior to joining RBC, Shazan co-founded and served as Chief Customer Experience Officer at Idea Couture. Please welcome Shazan. So, to kick off our conversation, I'd like to hear from each of you about what has been the biggest digital or technological transformation for your business since the pandemic started. So, perhaps we could start with Stephanie.
We were already on our digital journey, so we were fortunate that we didn't miss too much of a beat when the pandemic hit. We were already able to work remotely. Most of our team members had laptops. Our technology department had set up remote working, but what did happen is we were absolutely accelerated on the use of work-based social platforms, rolling out things such as Teams, rolling out Zoom, getting more comfortable as executives using video studio. And so that made a big difference for us. And very quickly, we had to pivot to help some of our clients that were less mature in their digital strategy and rapidly bring them up to speed. And the first piece was really allowing people to work remotely in a secure way, and then rolling out these social-based work platforms to assist in things like we're doing today, having virtual meetings, virtual work conferences, virtual workshops, and of course, a big priority was ensuring the health and safety of our team members. So we quickly spun up some apps using different technologies, and including our KPMG WorkSafe app where everyone checks in on a daily basis. So those are some of the things that happened at KPMG. And of course, we being in the client service business, we're also working across industries and helping our clients be able to work in the work from home and digital world.
That's great. And we're definitely going to circle back to sort of the client experience as well. But I'd like to hear from Jane. What has been the biggest transformation for TransAlta since this pandemic began?
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for including me. I think the biggest thing for us was moving out several hundred corporate workers into a remote work context. We are a power generation company, so we're an essential workers. We're a bunch of essential workers generating power in 3 countries worldwide. And so it was really about making sure we had secure platforms so people could continue their work in a way that was as least disruptive as possible, notwithstanding the pandemic. So it was looking at launching new technologies as well in the midst of the pandemic, so that we could ensure that just the services were not disrupted. So, one of the things that we noticed when we moved people out was just the technology requirements, not due to TransAlta, but just the load on the system in Calgary and beyond was large. So it was making sure that people had boosters and all the screens so that we could just be in a lockdown situation and not have people go back to the office whatsoever. I think the other thing that this is sort of less about technology in some respects when you're thinking of a laptop and computer that we made sure everybody had. But at the early days of the pandemic, we were unclear about what it was really going to look like from an executive viewpoint, and how could we maintain operations given that we are a power generation company in the event that things really went off the rails more than they actually did. And so one of the things that we made sure we had were all satellite phones in the event that we had to, if all technology was disrupted, and we had to look at sort of alternatives to staying in touch.
Well, I'm sure your work has been greatly appreciated. I know we've had some power issues here in Ontario and Toronto, where I live, particularly during air conditioner season. So, with a lot of people working from home, that's definitely created a strain. Tyler, your business is very sort of well positioned for this climate. I don't know if there was much technological transformation that Vidyard had to go through, or is it more so just helping others go through this sort of rapid acceleration of moving to an online world?
Yeah, well, thank you, and it's great to be here to talk about this topic. The team here at Vidyard, for context, we're about a 10-year-old organization, so we have grown up as what I would consider a digital-first company. But we also are at that stage in our organization where there is a tremendous amount of collaboration across our teams. We're a scale-up technology company. Our product teams work extremely closely together, alongside and aligned with marketing, sales, and the whole organization. And so for us, what was interesting was that it was less about a technology shift, and it was more about the cultural shift of how do we continue to work in a hyper collaborative environment, which we know is one of our advantages in the market of how close our teams work together. So how do we continue to do that when we're all distributed? And how do we take advantage of all of those great technologies we've already been using, things like Zoom and Slack and Vidyard and others, Google Apps and so on. So it was really interesting to see how it all played out, because at first, I think like most organizations, we felt, great, we'll react to this by taking what we used to do in the office and doing it remote. And whenever we had meetings, we would create a video call. We'd all get on a video call. But we all know where that's ended up, right? Everybody's getting zoomed out in our organization, is what we call it. And there's other challenges that come with that notion of, hey, let's just take things how we did it in an office and now do it remote. So we've been working a lot to think about not just how to react, but to actually adapt to this environment and to rethink, how is it that we collaborate? How can we change the way we do meetings? How can we reduce the amount of synchronous meeting times during the day? Because a lot of folks are at home, they have dependents, they have kids, their schedules aren't necessarily aligning with the 9 to 5 workday anymore. So it's been really interesting to see that for us. And we'll talk throughout this session, I'm sure, about some of the things we've done to adapt our internal processes and how we empower our people to collaborate. So that's really the focus that I've seen. And it's been really interesting, some of the outtakes that we've seen from it.
Thank you. And over to you, Shazan. Tell us about the transformation that you've seen in your role at RBC Ventures.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to be here. I'd say that I'll answer the question in sort of two parts. So, the first is that RBC Ventures is, of course, a part of RBC. We are focused on building products and services that fit outside of traditional banking. So when you ask the question, what is the biggest sort of digital transformation we've seen since the pandemic? There is the broad sort of RBC initiatives that have been underway, and very similar to Stephanie, have been underway for some time in terms of digital transformation. I would say that our focus on digital customer journeys and ensuring that that customer experience is well designed and well executed has really come to fruition in terms of the amount of online activity we're seeing. So when you look at the users on active mobile, 90-day active mobile users increased sort of 14% year over year. We have increased digital adoption to 50, close to 60%. And so, when you look at the broader move towards digital, I think overall in banking, we're seeing that. I think secondarily to that, the organization responded so well to government programs like SEBA, like BSAP, in terms of administering those programs to Canadians. So really proud of that work. And then more focused on ventures, we, very similarly to Vidyard, we're primarily digital first in most of our ventures. And so we were well positioned, for this period. I would say that those ventures that were sort of in person, where we had the opportunity to bring them online and to pivot, we absolutely did. And so, that coupled with the transfer or the move of folks to working remotely went very smoothly based on initial investments that we had. So, I'd say transformation, absolutely. We follow the markets and have had to adapt our ventures and our work style in response.
Wonderful. So since we all saw this kind of move to working from home, what are some of the steps that your organization has taken to keep employees engaged and to sort of maintain your corporate culture, the sort of creativity and free flowing of ideas? Given that we have not only just people working from home, but also in some cases now maybe a hybrid model where some people might be returning back to the office and others are still kind of hunkering down. So maybe Stephanie, could you kick it off?
Great, thank you. Thanks for the question, and great to see most of us has transitioned to the digital world effectively. In terms of corporate culture, that's an item we talk about a lot at KPMG. We're really proud of our culture and our values, and it's something that our CEO and the leadership committee is focused on. And so the first thing we've done is we've really had to think about how do we maintain our culture in a digital world. And some of the things that we've done is we've tried, and similar to what Tyler said, at first we were trying to do everything the same, just digitally, how we used to do it prior to the pandemic. But some of the pieces that are really important to us is really creating. We have quite a young workforce. We have a knowledge-based workforce. Most people are tech savvy. Almost everyone has a laptop. They're pretty comfortable in the digital world, but really missing the social network. A lot of our team work is part of their social network. And so we rolled out a lot around innovation in terms of setting up formal, what we call pods. In our case, we use Microsoft Teams. So we combined the formal piece where there's leaders there, you exchange ideas. And in fact, one of the things that I personally like, and I'm an extrovert, but what I like is the use of chat. We're getting a lot more ideas from those observers and the introverts. So that's on the formal side where we set up formal pods, groups of 10, groups of 25 to keep that camaraderie, collegial culture that we have. And then we've also set up informal meetings. And that was a big part of KPMG. And so we've had things, just drop in from 5 to 6 on certain days. If you're the class that just started, we just brought in, more than 500 campus hires across the country. And so we're really focused on our new employees, our new team members to get engulfed in the KPMG culture. And we've also we revamped our values. We thought it was important in this digital world and in the pandemic. And with HR, we revamped our values, and our CEO rolled those out. And one of them is about togetherness. And so we focused a lot on our culture about, we're in this together. We need to help each other. And we've really, again, been able to keep the teams engaged, but it's a continual process for us. We try to apply agile. It's not something that we did before being in digital studios. Tyler's really familiar with being on video and recording videos, but we've really increased our leadership skills in terms of our ability to connect digitally, and rolled out a number of training programs on how you engage people digitally to maintain that employee engagement and keep our culture alive throughout this journey that we're all in during the pandemic.
Thank you. I'm going to mix up the order a little bit here. Let's throw to Tyler since you got a shout out there. Tell me a little bit about how you've been able to maintain your corporate culture at Vidyard.
Yeah, before we do that, I think there was a comment on the last one. Do we want to pass it back over to see if we can? There we are. Did somebody have a comment on the last one?
Yeah, I was just going to build off what Stephanie had said around just the importance of looking at culture from a sort of broader perspective, and the importance of, really getting leaders front and center and focused on the fact that when they are working in a remote context, it requires a lot of leadership teams to stand up and really think differently and more agile around working with folks in a remote context, but also back in the office. And TransAlta brought all of its 1,600 staff worldwide back into the office. And when I say back into the office, about 500 or 600 of us are more corporate related staff. And so we wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with our essential workers who are out in the field. And so it's really about looking at the remote work for TransAlta in a different context, about how do we increase productivity if we take people back into a remote landscape going forward. So everyone's back. And with that, thinking about how do you maintain culture? And I think, Tyler, you made a comment around thinking about streamlining meetings and the importance of that so that people aren't zoomed out. And then also Stephanie's comment around just how do you get leaders to think more broadly about leadership if half your team is in and some of your team members are out. So that's just to build off those comments. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great, and I think some of the things that we've seen build off of all of that. When we've been looking at this aspect in the business, in hindsight, I recognize we've broken it down into what I consider the three C's to keep people as engaged and as tied into the culture as possible. And those three C's are communication, collaboration, and culture, all of which went through a huge amount of shock as we moved into this new world. So we focused in on each of those different areas because they all play a role in the productivity, the happiness, the mental health, and overall engagement of our employees. So when we looked at the communication side of things, we recognize that not only do we need to change the formats in which we deliver information broadly to our employees, our executives engage their teams and share information, but we also needed to change the cadence and the overall approach to it. And we felt that as we moved to a distributed environment, we had to get information out more timely, more quickly. And we didn't want to wait until those, monthly all hand meetings or quarterly updates. So we've been instituting weekly updates from our executive teams throughout the organization that include video messages being sent out to either their teams or to the organization as a whole. And so rather than trying to get everybody to hop on, a 30-minute or 60-minute Zoom call, the executives will record typically a 5 to 10 minute video in which they're providing, the most important updates from that week or from that 2 week period. They're often doing a screen share along with their webcam on where they're walking through some visuals, some slides, some reports, and they're sharing that then out with the team so everybody can watch that at their own leisure. They don't have to schedule off time, or it may conflict with a kid's dentist appointment and so on. And they're using, thankfully, our own tool at Vidyard. We have a simple tool for doing that, for recording and sending these videos. So we're, of course, walking the talk with our own technology, but it's really been liberating for executives to be able to record these videos and then send them out on their own. Right? We're not sending in like a producer to film them on camera. We're not making it, again, a big deal. They're just being like everybody else, right? They're being very personal, very human, and just sharing what's going on in the business. And that's been a big win for us, and something that I'm excited about. That was the communication. On the collaboration piece, I alluded to this, of being intentional in trying to reduce the amount of times people are spending on live video calls and using other techniques to share information, provide updates. Similar to our communication strategy, we've encouraged everybody to take a look at their meeting schedule. And we have the one less meeting challenge happens internally, or the 2 hours less of Zoom in a week, where we encourage people and say, if you have an hour-long meeting where probably half of it is you providing updates and then half of it may be conversation, reduce that to a 30-minute meeting, and then a day before that meeting, record a video of the material you'd be presenting, and then share that around so people can watch it ahead of time. So everybody can watch that asynchronous video on their own time, can get the updates, and then you go into a 30-minute meeting focused just on discussion. So we found that not only is it more efficient for people, it's also more inclusive because they can watch the updates on their own time, even if they're not able to attend the live meeting. And it's something we've realized that, even when we move back to the office, it's the kind of thing we want to continue doing because it's a much more effective way for people. So those are a couple of key anchors. And then the last C, sorry, I'll just be quick on this one, which is culture. And it was touched on earlier, is we've also been explicit in creating social activities virtually with our teams to keep people bonded, to continue to create that social currency, as we call it, that comes when people interact in personal ways with each other and have some fun together. Just last Friday, I hosted our Oktoberfest trivia for our team, in which we did a 45-minute trivia contest filled with prizes and things like that. And we're doing more and more of those to get people together in a social context. So those three things together have been sort of fundamental to how we thought about shifting in this new digital world to keep people happy, healthy, and engaged.
Mhm. That sounds great. Shazan, let's talk about what you guys are doing at RBC to sort of keep people engaged and keep morale up and the culture strong.
Absolutely, and I, I would take from Tyler, Stephanie, and the others, in terms of building on what they've said. I think we're doing many of the many similar things in terms of communication and collaboration. I will say that in addition to that, there is a this idea of being able to connect with each other, and I think the way that our portfolio is set up is we have natural pods. So I go back to what Stephanie was saying around creating pods. I think we've got natural sort of groups that are connecting on a daily basis in the work that they're doing. And so, I think that in those small teams, connection is quite good. Where we have been spending a lot of time is number one, focused on folks who are new to the team. I think, figuring out how to onboard somebody who you haven't really seen in person before is something that we care deeply about, and, started actually thinking about this right when we went to work remote. And actually, in a couple of months in May, implemented a fully digital onboarding sort of program that leveraged, video, that leveraged, teams to provide their expertise, to have a feeling of coming on board. I would say connecting is also really critical for us. I think, Tyler, I loved how you're going to sort of weekly updates. We actually have bi-weekly town halls, and something that we heard from our teams was that being at home, it's not the same as sort of walking down the hall and bumping into somebody at the water cooler. So how do we create those collisions? And the bi-weeklies are really great in that leadership can get in front of our teams to talk about our priorities and to talk about celebrate the things that are happening across the portfolio. We leverage we leverage more channels that existed before, like Slack. Slack is probably one of the greatest connectors that we have in terms of chat. We've created channels for interests, for families who have children, posting advice on how to entertain your kids when there's no school. Those types of things are really, really critical. And then finally, I think that the one thing we've learned through this period is that we have to be, number one, have empathy for our teams. And in having empathy, we've got to ask questions about how they're doing. And I think that piece is so important in order to understand how to respond, because, the pandemic is going to go through waves, clearly. The way that people are feeling is not going to be consistent from day one to day. I don't know what day we're at right now. And so the ability to understand and feel and be agile and be able to pivot based on the needs of our teams is really important.
And just before we leave you, I wanted to ask for a little bit of a follow up on this idea of onboarding, which is a question I was going to throw to everyone. So I will get everyone to weigh in on this one. But I'm very intrigued by the idea of a virtual onboarding program. What does that look like? What kinds of things are included?
Yeah, so we in our original design, when we were all in person, we had planned actually for a week long onboarding where you would have folks sit with each other in cohorts. You would have them rotate through different curriculum items, etc. But we realized that we couldn't do that, in a remote setting where you're on video the entire day. And so what we did was we took the content and we boiled it down to the necessities, and we essentially created modules in what we call a program called Ventures U, and we recorded those modules as the presenter, as we were doing them live for the first time. We also recorded them so that they would be there for new folks who come on board who may not have been able to attend those sessions. And when we have another live version where, of course, things change and they update, we will re-record them the next time we do them live. So it's a mix of live and recorded content. And also, if we do it in cohorts, people feel a sense of camaraderie with folks who are in it at the same time as they are.
Very cool. So Jane, I'd like to hear from you on the culture piece. How have you been able to keep employees engaged and find opportunities for them to interact creatively and share ideas and feel like they're still part of a team, even if they're working solo from home?
Right. No, great question. Thanks for that. So I think it's similar to what Tyler was speaking about in terms of when we were in lockdown and working remotely, we really spent a lot of time wanting to make sure that people were not feeling isolated and connected back to their teams. So we spent a lot of time on video platforms and had weekly or bi-weekly Friday afternoon, coffee chats in the afternoon. We onboarded a number of new grads to the organization during the pandemic, as well as a senior executive. And so really focusing on, I like what Tyler said around just massive communication, making sure that they felt welcome, that they belonged, and they did not feel disjointed in any way. So really making an effort for leaders to reach out and constantly chatting and connecting back to that particular employee. I think one of the other things too that has become very powerful learning for us is as we're training staff, a lot of our training modules are obvious virtual modules that folks can access at any time. But as we do the limited training that we do at the corporation, I think one of the advantages of being in the pandemic is all of these providers, whatever it might be, on talking about communication or having difficult conversations, or even some of our communications experts that we've dealt with online, all of this is now, no one's going anywhere in person. So this has become a great platform to reach out to even more people than we could have in the past. So that has been a real innovation in my view in terms of onboarding, training, allowing people to be included where we may not have had the budget to include people before, just given our training budget. So it's been a way to think about, I think what the pandemic has prompted is a way to think about the future of work and really allow us to sit back and go, how do we even get more crisp on what we want to do in the future? This is sort of paving the way for lots of other opportunities to open up to us, and I think we have to be open to it. And I think that's been communicated in this panel today, just about how people have been able to respond to it and think of new ideas and innovative ways to include people and to make them feel welcome and part of the team, even though you're sitting in a remote context.
Stephanie, I think you'd also mentioned onboarding perhaps students or interns, was it? Or just a new cohort, if you wanted to kind of flesh that out for us a little bit and tell us about how you went through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to RBC and what Shazan talked about, we went fully digital, but we also found that we needed to condense. So one of our learnings and in this digital world is being agile and condensed. So we onboarded, I think I mentioned 500 students across the country. So first there's the logistics side around getting them their laptops, et cetera. So I would say one of the pieces in onboarding is a lot more preparation time is required to make things go smoothly. So we were able to do that. Our team did a good job. Jane, with your HR background, our HR team really had to rethink that. But maybe I'll talk about what we did with our interns, because certainly having a daughter in university, the future of Canadians, and we're leaders in a position of privilege we really have to help the future generation feel that there's hope, there's prosperity. And so our interns, if you can imagine, we bring them all on typically in April or May, and the pandemic hit in March. And we were really concerned about, well, how do we bring these people on? Do we keep them? Do we not? And this goes back to our value set, where we felt we need to have integrity and we needed to give confidence in the financial security. So we designed digital university for our interns and rolled that out. So we taught them data and analytics. We taught them how to actually use artificial intelligence. We taught them about machine learning. And we really brought in those, I would call them the disruptive technologies, and held a digital university over the summer for these interns. And one of the things I'm really proud that KPMG did is we offered them all full-time jobs. Typically, we go through an interview process, and we felt there is enough stress out there in the citizens of Canada. We're in a fortunate position. You guys go through the university, tune up your skills, learn digital, learn disruptive tech, and we will see you in September. So that's a piece of onboarding that was absolutely different for us than before, and we'll bring some of those learnings forward, whatever the new reality looks like.
Mm-hmm. And Tyler, is there anything you wanted to add on that one?
There is just one idea on how we onboard and train new employees today. And I think this isn't specific necessarily to just due to the pandemic, but I think we've seen a lot of change in how we approach onboarding and training that I think actually bodes very well for this distributed world. And that is that, the traditional approach was somebody would come on board and they would have 2 or 3 days of constant onboarding. They'd be in synchronous training. They go through all of this, and our expectation is they walk away from that knowing everything and ready to go. And that's just not the reality of how people actually learn and retain information. And most people walk away, and 3 days later they're trying to remember how to do something, and they just can't. Right? It's too much information overload, and people are used to searching, finding an answer, and binging on something at the time that they need it. So I think, whether it's something you've already been doing or you're looking ahead, I encourage you to create your onboarding and employee training programs as bite-sized, on-demand, bingeable content that they can find when they need to and learn on their own time. Now, we still need those 2 to 3 hour, onboarding sessions where you're welcoming people, you're getting them used to things, getting them set up, getting their email going. But then we found that people have a preference where we can then say, I want to introduce you to our training and onboarding library. And don't worry, none of these videos are 20-minute long, boring things where you're going to want to, tab to another browser and watch a YouTube video and then say you watched it, right? They're all 2 to 5 minute short videos about very specific topics that you can learn about on your own time when you need to, or when you really need to know how to, re-enable your Slack account. There's a 1-minute video that shows you how to do that, right? So I think taking that approach of almost thinking of it more as like a YouTube channel and getting the core onboarding going, but then relying more on that quick, simple, on-demand content as a way for people to self-learn on their own time, and at a later point be able to come back and find answers to common questions for how to do things, how to run systems, how to do certain processes in their jobs. And as you do that, the great thing is, again, today, these all don't have to be highly produced videos. You don't have to get a videographer. You don't have to hire a crew. Get people in your business to record a screen share video, right? Record something with their webcam, record something with their smartphone, showing people how to do things. And what's also great about that is you start to get familiarity with other people in the organization showing you how to do these things. So it's just an idea I'll put out there. And I think as people are distributed, it's more and more important that we empower them to learn on their own time and give them those tools at their disposal.
Wonderful. So we've talked a lot about sort of changes to the workforce, but I'd also like to hear a little bit about dealing with clients and customers, and maybe how this pandemic has changed how Canadians want to interact with brands and goods and services. So Shazanne, I wonder if you could take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we certainly have seen quite a shift in consumption patterns. We've seen a shift in our behavioral patterns. If we just look across Venture's portfolio, we have quite a number of ventures in different sort of business segments. And so let's take home as an example, right? Our homes previously were our first place, work was our second, and everything outside was our third place, as Starbucks likes to talk about it. But home has really become our first, second, and third places. And so, how do we, think about our businesses and our ventures in a way that allow us to take advantage of that? And so we've got one venture called Smart Reno that helps to connect contractors with homeowners to help them build and renovate their homes, which we're seeing tremendous activity in that space. I think lumber is in great scarcity because of that. I think in the space, everything is moving to digital, whether it be realtors signing home sales, which, by the way, in Toronto have been up 42% in September compared to 12 months ago. We've got another venture called Moose Snap that helps you. It's a digital moving concierge that takes care of all of the things that are associated with move. And so, when you think about the changes in behavior, there's great adaptation there. Same with small business. Small business is a driver of our economy in Canada, and one of our ventures owner is focused on helping businesses form. So we've had, 20,000 Canadians have launched their businesses on Owner, and so I think with these changes, creating and applying new models that can adapt to changes in behavior is actually really critical and a focus for us at Ventures.
And I'd like to hear from Stephanie on this one as well.
Yeah, Shazan, similar. We've seen similar things. The change in the services and needs of our customers, and we tend to call them clients, has changed significantly, and definitely a pivot to, and our customers, will maybe group them in different categories. Those that were already on a digital journey and had a strategy, they've called us in to really help them accelerate that strategy. And typically that strategy has two components. One is about, and something we haven't talked about yet on this panel, is the need for cost efficiencies. We do know that there's a reset on our cost base and how we operate as businesses. And so part of the digital transformation is actually looking at your operating model and what your new cost base will be. So those mature, larger corporates, we've been working a lot around digital strategy acceleration. And the second side of that is migrating to the cloud. Many of them were on that journey, and I think CIOs in the larger corporations tended to be charged with that mandate. And lots of people were trying different things, they were thinking about it, but now what we see is the CEO and the CIO very much tied together to accelerate that journey. In fact, 4 out of 5, we did a survey, 4 out of 5 CEOs have accelerated their technology journey. So that's that group in terms of the services. So we've had to pivot our capabilities, where we're building out how we deploy our teams. And then also in the, Canada is a lot about a mid-market. We're very entrepreneur real type of economy. And so our mid-market clients, they need assistance on how to actually get started. And so lots of cyber work there. And in fact, supporting organizations that are more mature, working with the Toronto Board of Trade in terms of how they help organizations around Toronto quickly pivot to digital services to really keep going. So, things like B2B, are really in high demand. So that's, I guess, our portfolio of how we've been working with our clients. And then how we interact with our customer, we've had to rethink our customer journey from, when we start to interact with them. We're a relationship-based organization. It's based on long-term relationships and trust. So how do you build that digitally? How do you stay connected with the customer? So we've rolled out, new digital tools for our partners to be able to connect with our clients and build that trust quotient. And that involves different technologies, and a greater use, of course, of data and analytics is another piece. So customers, clients, they expect us to know them. So we've really made sure that we've improved our data and analytics, because we've heard on the panel sound bites. I find everything is faster, more concise, and you have to be agile. And so we've really built that into our customer journey.
Mm. Thank you. I do want to take some audience questions, but before I do that, there is one last question I wanted to put to each of you, and that is kind of looking forward. I'm curious how much of sort of what we've seen in terms of this rapid shift and all of these changes that you've all had to make at your organizations, how much of it is sort of likely to endure? What sorts of things do you? I know Tyler had touched on. We want to keep on doing this going forward, asking can we make this meeting more efficient by sending out all this information in advance, or can we reduce the amount of sort of live video chats? So I know certainly some of it is likely to endure, but are there things that you feel were sort of just out of necessity, and you'd like to see things actually go back to how they were? So maybe we could start with Tyler on this one.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, and I think the way that I think about it is the one thing that is absolutely going to endure for most businesses is the expectation that employees can and will work remote. We may not all be 100% distributed in the future, but allowing that flexibility and being set up to enable distributed teams will absolutely be a necessity for the majority of businesses out there. So we do need to continue to ensure we're adapting to that model, and we are taking a virtual first approach to collaboration as opposed to an in-office first approach to collaboration. So I think that's absolutely going to stay. I do think that people are going to want to get back into a physical environment to engage with employees and teams. Here at Vidyard, for example, we have kind of rebranded our headquarters as our collaboration center. So now, as a Vidyard employee, you absolutely work remote, but you have the opportunity to head on into the collaboration center for necessary team meetings, collaboration sessions, and so on. And so we've kind of reorganized the office to create collaboration spaces, almost in like sort of a hoteling style. And I think more and more businesses will adopt that kind of a framework. So I think that's one thing that we would expect to happen. And my last point on this is, as people are going to continue to be distributed, whether we like it or not as an organization, obviously embracing things like video, like Slack and so on is absolutely a necessity going forward. And as you do that, I want to make sure you're all thinking about not just, yeah, okay, we know how to do that already, right? We already know how to do Zooms, we know how to do Slacks, we're good, right? The reality is most organizations aren't yet good at it. Video, right? Most employees still don't have decent webcams, decent lighting. They haven't gotten training on how to be strong on camera, right? How to make eye contact during Zoom meetings, how to record and send custom videos as opposed to just joining Zoom calls. But I think these are all skills that we're going to need going forward. So I want you to think about that and be mindful as you head on into the new year, to be really active and proactive in those ideas of how do we make sure people know how to use these tools effectively, and how to do it in the context of how we want this business to run. Otherwise, tools like Slack and video calls and such will run off on their own and become more detrimental to the organization in terms of productivity and efficiency, than effective. So be mindful of that and proactive in how you make these changes going forward.
Jane, I wonder if you could offer some thoughts on sort of which parts of this change you think will stick around and which parts maybe won't.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think because TransAlta is back in the office, and we've been back in the office on a full-time basis since July 29th, what we're looking at going forward is allowing for some remote work opportunities for certain roles. And so that'll be moving out. And I think Tyler is absolutely correct in that we think that this is sort of the future, the way things will look in the future, and really, really sort of capitalizing on that and still maintaining productivity. You know, as a HR executive, it's really important for me that when people are in a remote landscape, that we're thinking as leaders how we can stay connected to our remote teams. And just, to me, there's a real opportunity here for leadership to rise and really take advantage of becoming even stronger leaders and managing their remote employees and remote work employees in a way that really still allows them to grow and develop. With that said, I do think that video and all of the video platforms that we've now brought into the organization and are using on a regular basis will require exactly what Tyler said, knowing how to present on camera, knowing how to build executive presence on camera, because I think some of those aspects will continue to exist in the long haul. I mean, if you think about doing business development on camera, that is an art on video. And to me, that's something that companies really need to be thinking about, is training their staff in that mindset. You know, we had an online communications expert work with the executives in the last few weeks just around that, and I think it's when you start utilizing that, you really see how much of a difference that can make. So I think this is for the long haul. I think we've also thought about it as, you know, this has been a pandemic. It's been sort of one time in history, but in the back of our minds, we're thinking we may need to implement some of these things for the long term, because I think we will probably see another pandemic come again, and we just want to be prepared and arm our people with as many resources as possible, so that if this happens again, people will be able to thrive in that environment. Thanks.
For sure. There's also another question that just came in that I'm hoping some of you could address from the audience, since we're getting to the sort of 10-minute mark. So please feel free to kind of add in your thoughts as well on sort of long-term sustainable change versus, you know, stuff that you'd like to do away with. But if you also want to tackle this question here, it's what areas of the tech landscape are your companies planning to invest in post-pandemic? So I wonder if maybe Shazan would like to take a crack at that one.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll start by talking about what I'd like to see, or what we think will endure, and that will sort of lead into answering that question. So, I think from an endurance perspective, my hope is that we'll continue with this new kind of humanness, I think, that we're seeing across, both our teams, across leadership. I think in no other time do we have windows into each other's homes to really understand, how our teams, live. And so I hope that will endure. I think to answer the question on what we think from a tech perspective, and I broaden that to talk about this from a products and services perspective. I think the pandemic is often we often refer to it as the great accelerator and the great amplifier. And so, those areas where, that enhance customer experience and customer engagement we believe certainly will continue to endure. We've seen transformation in the healthcare space in terms of telemedicine and in terms of platforms that drive care for Canadians in general. And we've got a couple of ventures in our portfolio, Boomerang being one of them, that went from in-person events focused on connecting boomers. We know that social connection is so important post-retirement, that we had these in-person events that we took virtual and have really just taken off. And so, I think for us in investing in, ventures that support the health of Canadians is really quite critical. We have another one called Dr. Bill that helps doctors focus their energy on caring for patients, not on the administration of billing, which is really important. I think some others that are really important. Some other areas that are really important for us is really just looking at how do consumers spend. We know that there's been a significant shift in spending and in saving, and so really monitoring and seeing how we respond to that in our portfolio is really important. We have another venture called Amply that helps Canadians save with every purchase that they make, and we know that that's so critical moving forward. So I think there are a lot of areas, a lot of white spaces that we're really excited about, and think that the time that comes post pandemic during recovery will be one of actually great opportunity for us to grow and to drive value to Canadians.
Mhm. And Stephanie, did you want to chime in on that as well? Sort of what aspects of this do you hope will kind of stick around? What aspects do you hope will maybe not stick around? And also, secondarily, what areas is your company planning on sort of investing in to kind of prepare for whatever may come?
Sure, and thank you for the question. Maybe I'll start with the second question, and from two vantage points. One, KPMG's vantage point. We will continue to invest and plan to continue to invest in the collaboration platforms and in data and analytics. And let me then talk about what we're seeing and what we believe our clients will continue to invest in. And it really falls into the area of data and analytics and AI. All of this digital communication that's going on, there's really essentially a waterfall of data. And so we do believe that there's going to be continued investment and refinement on how to actually turn that data into an asset and use that data. So we definitely think that will endure. And the other area I think is going to endure is tied a lot to the need to drive efficiency. So that artificial intelligence, machine learning, people want things faster and people want things at a lower cost of service. So I do believe that that's going to endure. And the innovative part, which excites me, and we know this is going to happen, is there's going to be the continued co-development of assets on low code, no code platforms. And I don't want to get too technical here, but what the pandemic has done, and it was already happening before, but it's accelerated the opening up between organizations of co-creating a better customer experience or co-creating a better application. We showed our WorkSafe app to a tier one bank, and then they in turn showed us theirs. And out of that, we were able to improve our employee WorkSafe app. That would not have happened before the pandemic. So I think the continued development of software engineering and applications, and us getting used to using apps across all generations. So that really starts at the seniors right through to the 5-year-old. So I think that's going to endure, and I'm actually pretty excited about that. And KPMG will continue, of course, to invest in those platforms as well.
Hmm. We're almost out of time, but there is one more question from the audience I really wanted for us to take a stab at. So we may only have time for one person to answer this one, but the question is, what changes are needed in our public education system to embrace older adults retraining and upskilling? By older, I am referring to anyone over 40 all the way to 90 plus. We hear a lot about STEM and STEAM education for young people, but how can we work together to make sure older adults don't get sidelined in the new economy? me. If there's anyone who's particularly keen to answer this question.
Well, I'll give it a go. That's a tough question. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a daughter in university, and I think it is important that no one is left behind. So there's the whole piece of getting rolling out training programs, both with government and with higher education, to be able to get access. So that's I'm talking about having access to devices and some training around the use of digital and collaboration platforms, of video, of asynchronous learning. And so I do think we have a responsibility, both at that private sector level as well as at the public sector level, to ensure that we're making education accessible to all. And there's a lot of work being done around that on the community front, but also have a concerted effort around the base skills that are needed to learn in a much more digital online environment. But happy to have the other panelists.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that one?
Maybe just a really quick.
Sorry, Tyler. I was going to say I totally agree. I think it's allowing for the time to ramp up and for the space for older educators, and based on your criteria, I would be in that category. So for older educators, to get used to the tooling, I think is really important. Tyler?
Yeah, I was just going to say I don't know what the solve is in terms of where and how do we inject this training on sort of being digital savvy and digital first, which I think is a big part of it. But the one thing that makes me very optimistic is that there has been such a focus in the tech industry over the last 5 years on making all of these tools as easy and approachable and accessible as possible. And that's the wonder of the cloud computing world that we're all seeing. I can't remember the last time I installed an actual application on my MacBook, right? Almost everything I use is one-click cloud-based. It's, when I record a video and send it, it's one click from my browser, record it, share it. I'm not uploading files. So, I often, joke with people that my 13-year-old daughter records and sends videos every day using TikTok. And yet my 40-year-old peers in business can't figure out how to do the same thing in a business context. But it's not that hard. And thankfully, so many of the tools are now made to be approachable that I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to educate, young and old on how to do these things going forward. But you're right, we absolutely have to put that focus in to make sure that, nobody is left behind in this digital revolution. It's a great point, great question.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. But on behalf of the Globe and Mail, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, for sharing your insights and your thoughts. They're much appreciated. And to our audience members, thank you for joining us. And just a reminder that you will receive a link to the recorded webcast once it's ready. And we hope to see you next time.